Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to another session of Discovering Islam. I have lost the count. I don't want to mention the number because there is a difference of opinion whether it's the 30th one or the 29th one. We started discussing fasting in the last session, and I mentioned that fasting in the month of Ramadan, Quran mentions, is meant to create, inculcate within us taqwa, God consciousness. And the Quran also mentions that fasting has been ordained to be observed during the month of Ramadan because it was in this month that the Quran was revealed. So there is a very direct, understandable relationship between the Quran and the month of Ramadan and fasting, and as a consequence of it, uh, creating within us God consciousness. But I also mentioned that this great month and this ibadat enables us also to have within us the all important emotions of shukr, of thankfulness, which is the basic spirit, the starting point, the motivating factor that inclines us to, to be religious and to be thankful to the Almighty. And when you talk about shukr, it's, I won't call it the opposite, but its partner, which put together really completes the whole picture of a good person, of a good believer, and that is sabr. So sabr is also what we are able to get through uh, fasting, fasting in the month of Ramadan. But there are many other good aspects of human personality that are hidden within us that tend to get created within the month of Ramadan when we are fasting. And one of those good features of a human being is to be inclined towards doing charity, spending in the way of Allah. So, although charity is to be done all round the year, but somehow it's associated more strongly with fasting in Ramadan. And there is an understandable reason. You see, we do good deeds for the sake of the Almighty. That's fine. That's important. We do good deeds to be rewarded in the next life. That's fine. The Almighty has promised, so why should we not? But I think we also do good deeds because each good deed has its own immediate target as well. So when you are spending in charity, your immediate goal is to spending in the way of Allah while pleasing Him and while seeking uh, good results in the next life. Uh, we also need to have a very strong feeling for those whom we are helping. That feeling of attachment to the suffering people can only come to us if we put ourselves in their shoes. We start imagining uh, what would have happened to us had we been in their position. Uh, something called empathy. So we need to empathize with others. And honestly, you can only empathize with others if you yourself have been in that situation which the other people are going through. Otherwise, it's difficult to imagine. I mean, you can make an attempt, but it won't be quite as genuine as if you yourself have gone through that particular form of suffering. So, I mean, one aspect of poverty is people don't sometimes have enough uh, money to spend to have food. They're hungry. Their kids are hungry, and and they can't afford it. So when we are fasting and when we go through the pangs of hunger and thirst, that causes us to have a feeling for those people who suffer all year round because of hunger. I mean, honestly, let's face it, when we are hungry while fasting, we have lots of good food to look forward to at the time of iftar. You know, the more we are hungry, the more we are hopeful that the iftar time is approaching near and we'll eat. Imagine the plight of the people who do not have any hope because they can't afford to have food. So I think that is one important reason why charity has a strong relationship with fasting. Because when we fast, we actually put ourselves in the position of those who are poor, and thus we are able to imagine more closely, more uh, genuinely what they must be going through uh, when they're hungry. And it's therefore not surprising that we learn that the Prophet ﷺ, even though he was an extremely charitable person, but his charity would know no limits at the time of during the month of Ramadan, and he would spend everything that would come to him. And it's because of the fact that it has got something very direct, directly to do with fasting. Okay, the next important lesson of fasting is that we get an opportunity to seek forgiveness from the Almighty. Now, you might say that, I mean, this is something that you've added because you had nothing else to say in this presentation. So you added forgiveness. I'm telling you, no, it really is a very genuine point because you see what happens during the month of Ramadan is that the entire pattern of life changes. It's a complete revolution. The problem with our life is that sometimes we get into the trap of doing things which are wrong. We don't want to do them. But we find ourselves at times helpless. I mean, I'm doing it, I want to get rid of it. But it's just happening. It's just a flow. You need to put brakes on the flow of life for a while in order for you to take stock of what has happened and then make a renewed um, you know promise to yourself, resolve that I'm not going to do it anymore. I'm going to start afresh in the way of the Almighty. And that is exactly what the month of Ramadan provides us. It's an opportunity wherein honestly the life stops, it changes. It is as if Allah is telling us, wait a minute, stop there. Think about what you have been doing in the past. Imagine this great blessing. It comes our way every year. Well, we have 5 times a day opportunity to seek, forgiveness from the Almighty. That works sometimes, but then there comes a month in a year when the Almighty just forces us to completely change the way we are living, the way we are uh, going through the different uh, routine matters of our life. The routine is completely changed. So it's uh, it's something that helps in reviewing our past performance, particularly because of the fact that Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is reported to have said, uh, "Man sama Ramadan imanan wa ihtisaban, ghufira lahu ma taqaddama min zambi." The one who fasts with iman and ihtisab. Iman, that is, you fast because you believe in Allah, you believe in the next life, and ihtisab means to take a stock of your past life, which is to seek forgiveness. When you do it, it is then that your past sins are forgiven. So, I mean, it is a great opportunity. And imagine the atmosphere completely changes. The otherwise hitherto deserted masajid, they're crowded. It is as if it is a season of good deeds, which is now on, and you are, given the opportunity to perform good deeds naturally. It has to do with the atmosphere. Within this month, we have the all important night called Laylatul Qadr. It is because of this night that the entire month gets the privilege of being a blessed month. It was this night that the Quran was revealed. Um, Obviously, what it means is that the Quran was got started revealing. Inna anzalnahu fi laylatil qadr. So that night, because it's so very important, and the Almighty informs us that it's not just that the Quran was revealed in that night. All important decisions are taken in that night, and they are taken and then they are transmitted, transferred to be implemented in this world and wherever else the Almighty wants to implement his plans, his decisions. So it's a night which, in particular, is an occasion for us to look for that night. Actually, looking for the night of Qadr is looking for the pleasure, the mercy, the attention of the Almighty. And obviously, it enables us to focus more in our prayers. It's quite natural, when you were informed that on a particular night or on a certain occasion, the Almighty would be there as he always is with the decision to forgive and to be merciful in a way that you can't even imagine. So it gives us uh, an additional reason to seek His forgiveness. Attached to this night and the nights of the month of Ramadan is the understanding of the night prayer, or call it the early morning prayer, tahajjud prayer. It is basically the prayer of tahajjud which really has been emphasized in the Quran, Sunnah, and Hadith, um, in a way that if there is any other prayer which is dear to the Almighty, apart from the five obligatory prayers, it is this tahajjud prayer. It's a prayer which every believer, even if he or she is not praying at the moment, has a desire that he should begin saying it as soon as is possible. It's a prayer whereby the the Almighty mentions that He comes down uh, at the lowest sky. Obviously, it's metaphorical, and is there to listen to the prayers of the believers and to respond to those prayers. Uh, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam always said his tahajjud prayer. According to the Quran, this prayer was obligatory for him. Uh, Obviously, this must was said quite as fervently in the month of Ramadan, even more as it was done outside the month of Ramadan. Uh, and it is said that once in one of the months of Ramadan, and most likely, obviously, it must have been the very last one, when he decided to, unlike his normal routine, step out of his house and be in the masjid and say his tahajjud prayer over there. And quite obviously, there were a few companions in the masjid when they saw the Prophet, they uh, also prayed behind him. Um, one can imagine the atmosphere, the sincerity, the effect, the impact of those prayers. Um, so the next day, the word spread across in Medina. The Prophet ﷺ came out, said his tahajjud prayer. So the next night, there were more people, and this prayer was said. So obviously, the third night, the information, the news spread even further, wider to more people, and therefore, understandably, there were more people who came on the third night. In the fourth night, it is said that the masjid was crowded, and Prophet ﷺ didn't come. And it is said that he mentioned that he didn't want to for people to get an impression that it's something which is important, which is binding. Uh, it's quite understandable that not everybody can say tahajjud at the time when it should ideally be said. So there were quite a few companions who still wanted to benefit from as much as was possible from the blessings of tahajjud prayer. So they asked the Prophet, and he allowed them to say the same prayer in the early part of the night. This was allowed to them not just in Ramadan, but even outside Ramadan. So the witr prayer, which most Muslims say after Isha, is basically the tahajjud prayer, which when people are not able to perform at the right ideal time, they're allowed to perform after Isha. You know, when things are arranged in a certain formal way, then people start attaching their own concepts to it. And now it's really something which people think is binding and has to be said after Isha. Although the Prophet ﷺ never ever offered it after Isha. It was tahajjud, basically tahajjud prayer. Witr is odd. Witr means odd number. So tahajjud prayer was said by the Prophet in a way that the number would always be odd. Normally it was 11, and it was done in various different ways: 2 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2, sometimes 4 plus 4, sometimes all running without any uh, interruption or resting between two rakats, and so on. Uh, what I'm trying to say is that, like it was done in the case of witr prayer, similarly, it was also allowed during Ramadan for what is now come to be known as Taraweeh prayer, which is actually the tahajjud prayer allowed to be said after Isha. As I said, the Prophet never said it. It seems that Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu never said it. It seems Umar radiallahu anhu never said it. But there were other companions who said it. And at the time of Umar radiallahu anhu, during his caliphate, uh, he saw people saying uh, tahajjud prayer early, which people now call Taraweeh. Taraweeh is actually the resting time between the four rakats that people say. Tarbiya, and that's its plural. So he saw people saying his prayer after Isha in small groups, and it seemed a bit of, it was a chaotic uh, situation where one recitation is disturbing the other and so on. He didn't like it. Obviously, it was not the right ideal way of doing things. So he asked one imam to lead the prayers, and all of them to say their tahajjud prayer, to say their Taraweeh prayer behind him. He never joined them. And later, uh, once again, when he was going past the masjid and he saw that this prayer was going on, he entered the masjid. He saw people saying the prayer as he had asked them to behind one imam, and he praised them. That's about it. And now, really, it has become a part of the Muslim tradition amongst the Muslims in all societies, that during the month of Ramadan, Taraweeh prayer is said, which is fine. When it's allowed by the Prophet, obviously nobody can have any objection to it, except for the fact that it really needs to be clarified over and over again that the ideal prayer is Tahajjud prayer. It is only a second best alternative. You say it's fine, but do always target, aspire to say your Tarawih prayer. Sorry, Tahajjud prayer. Now, in the Tahajjud prayer, I have made a suggestion. I'm not sure I'm the only one who's made that suggestion, but I want to just repeat it. Quite often it so happens that people say their prayers and they just say their prayer. They complete the formality. This is something which is remarkable about believers. They do things because they have to be done. As simple as that. What is the purpose? What is the spirit? Do you get anything out of it? That is a question which they don't even address. They say that this is what we have been asked to do, and we are doing it as obedient servants. Nothing wrong with this approach. But again, this is the second best approach, if not the third best. The best approach is that yes, we have to be obedient to the Almighty there, but the Almighty never asks us to do anything without a reason, without some wisdom behind it. So we must know what the real objective is, and we should try to achieve that objective. As I've said, and I was talking about Salat, formal prayers, the objective behind formal prayers is to remember Allah. And you're reciting the Quran, you must understand the Quran. We don't know Arabic, and therefore we don't understand the Quran. By the way, you can know Arabic, even without learning Arabic, without learning its grammar. There are different ways of doing it. One way is to just continue to look at the translation, continue to translate with a translator, with a guide translating for you. Just a small ad. I keep doing it so you can join one of my classes. And you can also ask me to let you have the regular morning translation word by word so that, when you are in a habit of it, doing it every morning, there's a hope, genuine hope that you'll be able to start translating at least some part of the Quran. Sometimes you might get a flavor of understanding it directly. My suggestion is that because now we have the smartphones with us, which can do so many things for us, good and bad. Let's do a good thing through this important device, which is to have your smartphone somewhere on your side, on a table. And when you have completed reciting Surah Al-Fatiha, you open your Quran app, recite it with a translation written underneath the Arabic text. You understand, read it. Keep doing it for as long as you can. It's such an immense pleasure that you are reading the Quran and you're reading the Quran from cover to cover. You are reading the Quran along with its meanings. It can actually change your approach towards your prayers. You know, somebody asked me only last night. He said, I am a bit embarrassed asking you this question, but I have to ask." He said, "I've started reading the Quran and I've started understanding it, and I've completed reading the Quran once, and I'm doing it for the second time. But you know what? It's monotonous, same over and over again. What should I do?" Well, I said, unfortunately, we have not approached the Quran properly. That is why we find it. Obviously, it's repetitive, but there is a reason for it. So, I've said it before, and I want to repeat it again, that because people don't find the Quran very interesting, they have attached this phenomenon, this understanding concept of thawab, rewards. So what I feel is that people, when they don't understand anything, they don't understand anything why the Quran is being recited, they just keep reminding themselves reward, sawab, 100, 200, 1,000, 2,000, and so on. I think this is not the right approach. You must understand. So, but what do you do about monotony? Well, I think in order to understand the Quran and to read it properly and to derive maximum benefit, pleasure out of it, you must know what the Quran is. Every book has a style of presentation. There are textbooks on subjects, there are books of poetry, there are fiction books, and so on. What is the Quran? Well, if you ask somebody, a Muslim, he'll say it's book of guidance, book of Allah. No, no, that's not the question. What is the style of presentation of the Quran? Uh, the way it has been presented by the Almighty for it to become a book of guidance for Muslims? And the answer is, and thank the one who has come up with this answer. The reality is always there, but unfortunately, it's not discovered. The world has been there for hundreds and thousands of years, but there are people, scientists, etc., who discovered so many things. So honestly, I mean, this understanding that the Quran is actually the description of the saga of the warning that the Messenger Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam gave to his nation. It is the description of that story. The Prophet was asked to warn his nation the way earlier nations were warned by their messengers. The warning was not just of the next life and the accountability process, it was of a special punishment that was meant for the nation who received the message from their messenger. They were told that, look here, I have come from your creator. This is his message. You believe and you succeed. But if you're going to reject it, you are doomed. You're going to be punished, not just in the next life, but in this life as well. This happened in the case of many messengers earlier, and this happened for the last time in the case of the last messenger, Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And his, entire journey of delivering this message and achieving the Almighty's expectation all along was accompanied by these reminders of those earlier stories, real stories of messengers delivering the message, their nations rejecting the message, and then they getting punished. This happened for the last time 1400 plus years ago. And this time round, this whole process was fully preserved. It has not been allowed to be changed. So now, when you read the Quran, and the Quran now is in 7 groups, each group, when you read, you are actually going through that process. You become a part of that journey. Imagine the Quran is a communication between Allah, the Creator, and His Messenger, Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. During the course of the 22, 23 years when he was undertaking this important project, during that journey, the Almighty continued to guide him, respond to his questions. You have the privilege of reading the entire journey 7 times in different sequence, different ways. And if you have that in mind, if you have that in mind, you'll never get bored. I mean, there are occasions when you are even otherwise bored. You're not in a mood. People, they have this tremendous capacity of being extremely bored. These days, I am a part of a school. Early in the morning, there are some students who come and I tell them, life is so boring. I can see from your face. People are bored. That's something different. But normally, if you are in the right state of mind and you read the Quran, and I want to tell you that, reading the Quran, what motivates you the most is the fact that you know that it is Allah's word without any change, without any addition or subtraction. Obviously, questions do arise, doubts do come, but they come and they go. But the fact that you are reading the exact words of the Almighty that were delivered to his messenger, and he then, as a consequence of this guidance, was able to do the task for the last time in this world before the day of judgment, something which was a reminder of the day of judgment. That a man, he declared that he is receiving the Almighty's message, and he's all alone. And he's telling his people, the mighty leaders, that you're going to be doomed quite the same way as Pharaoh was doomed. And this happened in a matter of a few years. That's the story that you read in the Quran. How can you get bored? It is the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ, written in the best possible way. You cannot imagine any way better than this. And it's not a human author who is writing it, it's the Almighty who is actually guiding him in that journey. So, what I'm saying is that in Tahajjud prayer, read the Quran, understand it, hold it in your hands. Your prayer is your prayer is going to be accepted. Don't worry. No, this is a problem. People have those problems of fiqh, some rules that some scholars have come up with that have got nothing to do with the Sharia, with the Quran, with the Sunnah, with Hadith. They have their own views. Fine. I mean, every scholar has a right to have his views, and every non-scholar has a right to disagree with those views if he doesn't find it in accordance with the Quran, Sunnah, and Hadith. Do it and start enjoying the Quran, and inshallah, you'll find that the Quran is brilliant. There's no doubt about the fact that there's no blessing under the sky more dear and valuable than the Quran. Now, I'm going to mention two ahadith. There are some beautiful ahadith regarding the month of Ramadan and fasting, but I'm just going to mention two which are associated with this month. One of them is that says, when you do something good, this is hadith which is called hadith Qudsi. That is, the Prophet ﷺ tells us that this is what the Almighty says. So it says, when you do a good deed, you are eligible to a reward which is from 10 times as valuable as your deed itself, than up to 700 times. From 10 times to 700 times. Now, you see, this is the relationship between Quran and Hadith. If you are able to understand a Hadith in accordance with the Quran, really brings you a new, fresh angle of looking at the Quran. There is a verse in the Quran that says that when you do a good deed in Surah Al-An'am, you get 10 times as much in return as the deed itself deserved. But there is another verse that says that if you spend in the way of Allah, it is like, there are uh, 7 branches of that grape that take off. Each branch has 100 seeds. So, in other words, 1 penny is going to become as big, as valuable as 700. Now, there it says 10. In the other verse, it's 700. This hadith says that's what the range is. That's the range, the minimum and the maximum. And obviously, the difference between the two is, or whatever is in between, depends on how sincere you were while doing a good deed, how many sacrifices you made, how much did you understand. So, the better the quality of good deed, the more reward you are eligible for. But that's the starting point of the hadith. It says that's the pattern normally. However, fasting is an exception. As sawmuli, fasting is done for me. Va'ana ajzibi, and I'm going to reward for it myself personally. That's what the Almighty says. And obviously, there's a question. I mean, is it not a fact that all other good deeds we do for the Almighty? So, what is so special about fasting that the Hadith says that fasting is for me and I'm going to reward for it? The answer seems to be that while it is true that all good deeds are done for the Almighty, for the sake of His pleasure, every other good deed that we know is actually done for some benefit of ours, uh, in addition to the pleasure of the Almighty. I mean, to thank and to remember Allah is my need. So if I pray, I'm benefiting from it. I mean, that's what my nature, my conscience, wanted me to do. When we are spending in the way of Allah, when we're giving zakat and charity and far, obviously we want to help the poor, our relatives and others. Sharia has only given us a direction, and so on. Every good deed that you do is actually done because there is something within your nature that inclines you to do it. Fasting is an exception. It's unnatural. You know, you don't eat, you don't drink. What do you mean? I mean, it's natural for me to do it, but we have been asked to do something which is unnatural, and we do it only for Allah. He has asked us to fast, and therefore we fast. And the Almighty says, therefore, I'm going to reward for it. Which is brilliant. I mean, which really means you can't even imagine what kind of reward it would be. Uh, the other hadith is again equally beautiful, which says the Prophet ﷺ said that a believer uh, has two good news that he receives or he would receive. One good news he receives at the time of iftar, and the other good news he's going to receive when he's going to meet his Lord. Now, okay, but what is the relationship? Well, by mentioning fasting and iftar, Prophet ﷺ is actually mentioning the fact that the life of a believer is also like a fast. You know, there are restrictions, let's face it. We cannot do everything that comes to our mind, everything that we desire. So there are checks, there are limits which the Almighty has desired from us that we commit ourselves to. So, like we get good news at the time of iftar, most, most certainly it's always a good news. The whole day long fasting is over and you eat and you drink. Likewise, the hadith says, gives you this good news that after this life of fasting, of restrictions is going to be over, you'll get a good news. You will get a good feast of breaking your fast, which is brilliant. Okay, we have itikaf during the month of Ramadan, which is what the Prophet ﷺ did every Ramadan. It said in one of the Ramadan he couldn't do it because of some battle. He sat for itikaf for 20 days and nights the next month. So the next year. The idea is to uh, experience Laylatul Qadr and to focus, concentrate. Most certainly, praying to the Almighty, no matter what you're doing, is helpful in coming close to Him. Even when you're extremely busy, we're still supposed to say our prayers because we need to be reminded. Um, but in many cases, when we say prayers, we are actually telling the Almighty, we are your obedient servants. You asked us to pray, we are saying our prayer. The circumstances are not very congenial, but we're still praying. But obviously, we would like to improve the quality of our prayers. So, etikaf is a time when people they take some place, some part of a masjid, and they isolate themselves and they remember Allah, they pray to Him. And the idea is to experience what people say, discover uh, Laylatul Qadr. Uh, when the month of Ramadan ends, uh, there is a there is normally a problem that arises amongst Muslims. That is regarding the question whether it's actually ended or not. So sighting of moon really has been a problem. I just want to make a brief comment. You know, at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, there was no way of finding out whether the moon has appeared or not, except to see with the visible, with the eye, to see on the at the horizon whether it has appeared or not. If it was cloudy or it was there was dust and there was no possibility of viewing uh, the moon, the crescent, then obviously the other alternative was that complete 30 days because we've not been able to see it. But if there are now ways of making it completely certain that the moon has appeared, then there is no way that we should rely on seeing the moon with our eyes, naked eyes, to make sure that the moon has appeared. You know, the difficulty that has arisen is that people, when they read a hadith, they think that this is now the ultimate decision of the Almighty, which has to be followed not just in spirit but in letter as well. So, obviously, there are instructions of the Prophet ﷺ that see the moon and fast, and see the moon and stop fasting and celebrate Eid. This is which is quite understandable given those circumstances. But I'm absolutely sure that had he been asked that we have a reason, a way to be absolutely certain that the moon has appeared, what do you have to say? And the Prophet ﷺ would have certainly said, go ahead and do it. The important thing is that the moon has appeared in the design, in the scheme of the Almighty. But unfortunately, uh, that's one of the tests of life that people they form their opinions on the basis of arguments which are not valid, and then they stick to their guns, and that's what the trial of this life is all about. I mean, honestly, sometimes I feel I don't want to say to about anyone, any particular person, when you are exchanging views and forming opinions, and you're trying to convince me and I'm trying to convince you, quite apart from the fact that we're trying to understand a concept, your honesty is being tested, honesty of your intellect, and you are also being tested for whether you are being arrogant or not. I mean, it can be sheer arrogance that I say that, who are you to tell me that this is what the right understanding is? So, we need to be careful. I mean, obviously, everybody has a right to say that this is my point of view, but that doesn't really mean that you say that this is what it is, and I'm not going to make any changes, full stop. And you force others also to follow your point of view. Why would anyone in his senses ever want somebody else to follow his point of view? I mean, if I have formed a point of view, I should just put it across with his arguments. But that's a completely different issue. Last but not the least, in comes Eid. And obviously, there's Eid prayer. But before the Eid prayer starts, actually, ideally, much before that, we should have already given Zakatul Fitr, which is Fitran. There are a number of different descriptions of what the value or amount should be. But the idea is that, on the Eid day, there are many poor people who cannot celebrate Eid properly. Don't have, as I said earlier, they don't have means to have proper food. So at least on the day of Eid, uh, every member of a household should contribute towards another family an amount or meals that they can have, good, decent 2 meals on the Eid day. That's what the idea is. That is why we find that there are a number of different possibilities of zakatul fitr that have been mentioned. Depends on what you can afford, but most certainly, if we know that the idea is that we are going to give it to poor people who can't afford food to have a decent meals, 2 meals on the Eid day, that would suffice. And obviously, in order for this to to be doing its job properly, it has to be given uh, before the Eid day so that people, have their food in place and they can then have good meals. Okay, may the Almighty enable us to understand His religion properly and may He enable us to follow it to the best of our abilities.